Greetings everyone, Patrick Reagan here. Welcome to the behind-the-scenes documentary of my Legend of Zelda fan film, The Legend of Zelda: The Search for the Triforce. As you'll see in a little bit, I'm a huge, absolute huge Zelda fan. Always been a Zelda fan. I have the shirt, and I have different other really cool things from Zelda, which I'll show real quick in this little montage. So basically, the idea of a Zelda film I've always had ever since at least 5th grade. 5th grade was kind of like, that was one of the very first ideas for a film I ever had, and that was the first time I kind of had the idea of doing filmmaking when I grew up. Especially because I was interested in looking at behind-the-scenes stuff. Huge Indiana Jones fan as well, so I loved adventure stuff. And I wanted to take a crack at my own Zelda fan film, especially because I always wondered why they never made a film based on Zelda. I figured it would be cool. At the time, I did not know that film adaptation of video games had a huge stigma around them. I was very naive at the time. And so, I kind of, at first I just loved Zelda, but I didn't really, it took a while for me to really get the lore and the mythos and everything like that. In a way, it's kind of glad that this fan film got delayed until now, because I'm more versed in the lore from Legend of Zelda all the way to Breath of the Wild, and so I was really able to let loose with the lore and make it more, of a good culmination of everything from Legend of Zelda, like every kind of lore and mythos and everything I could possibly incorporate. And so originally I would have come up with like an original idea. In fact, if you look, especially with my short films, my first idea was called The Legend of Zelda: The Master Sword. Yes, I could not really come up with a creative name for it. And then, I eventually tried to look at different ideas to do live action. One of the things that really inspired me was Josh Dixon's fan film, The Sage of Darkness, as well as B&B Finish's fan film, The Hero of Time. And even before that, I was inspired by the mangas. I really loved reading the mangas and everything like that. And these fan films, they also, gave me ideas of how I could do my own film without having to wait until I got to Hollywood or a film industry. And even like Josh Dixon's film, I especially also really absolutely loved the chemistry between the people making the films, especially looking at the behind the scenes, seeing how Josh and Dan and Blake Henderson and Natalie and them, with the bloopers and everything, that just really showed me that I could make my own movie, make my own DVD, and bonus features without having to worry about Hollywood, which looking back I think was a good idea because Hollywood has gotten, really terrible lately. And I had different ideas. Like one, I was actually going to try to do an adaptation of Ocarina of Time based mostly off the manga, and I even wanted to do that in 2012. I mean, that stop motion one that I made was kind of like a first little practice attempt, but I wanted to do a live action. And I kept the idea in mind, but then I decided maybe I would do Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask as animated, so that way they could be more within my control. But one of the nagging things, especially because after finishing Mind Worms, I was in my fulfillment era of trying to fulfill all the types of films I wanted to do, like Whispers in the Cellar, Last Tapes from Winston Camp, and Legend of Zelda was definitely on the list, especially because I had plans, to move to Colorado, after finishing grad school. I knew that deep down, from my nostalgia, one thing I absolutely wanted to do was I wanted to do at least one low-budget live-action Zelda film at Hickory Grove, where I spent my childhood and everything. Especially because, I used to have many different adventures there. Like, it was always fun to be there. You had that root cellar that looked really cool. It was almost like going on an adventure, and I'd always walk around, and you will also see more of this on the DVD, but I used to walk around and imagine I was in Hyrule or in some kind of fantasy land. It I felt, I had to make an adventure film or a Legend of Zelda film with this, at least one, before moving out of Mississippi. And so 2021, a year after finishing Mindworms, we decided we would do it. And my basic idea, and you'll also see more of this on the DVD, was to make something that I could do on a budget. In fact, for a while I actually nicknamed this project Budget Zelda, because it was one that I was able to do on a very low budget. I decided, basically my decision was that I would not be able to give it, a very epic feeling due to our low budget, so it would not be Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, but maybe I could do at least a Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, or something like from the 80s and 90s. And I also took inspiration from the Link to the Past comic book, the one that they used to publish in Nintendo Power. And so I decided I would make up for the low budgetness by giving it a little bit of a campiness. So I felt that was the best way to go was for the campy route. Make it kind of like, the Black Cauldron or Legend or Labyrinth. Make it a type of fantasy, like a family-friendly fantasy film you'd see in the late 80s or early 90s, which also fits Zelda, especially if I'm going for that Link to the Past route. And one of the things that is, one of the reasons why a lot of film adaptations of video games are usually terrible is because they spend too much time trying to adapt the video game rather than the story. What I mean by that, especially with Nintendo, their mantra is they always do the gameplay first and the story second. So my idea was to write the story, so I wasn't adapting the video game, I was adapting the story that's written around the video game. And of course you want to have your nods and your references, but the story has to come first in a film. So I wrote the story first, I wrote the script and kept rewriting it to make sure the characters and plot points worked. And then as we went along, I added in the references and Easter eggs. So I wrote the story first and then put in the references and Easter eggs where it made sense. And of course, to make the movie, I had to look for actors. One of my actors I chose was Percy Sullivan. Like, ever since we first filmed their scenes for Mindworms and Farmer Next Door, they always expressed interest in being in a Zelda fan film.
I thank you for bowing down, though it wasn't necessary.
And while working at Panera Bread, I met with Eric Berdick. He's always wanted to be an actor, that was his passion. And we got him to star in Whispers in the Cellar, that was his very first movie. In fact, I even credit that film as introducing Eric Berdick, and he's actually helped out with some more of my features and shorts afterwards. And we got him in Legend of Zelda because I felt that it was perfect. I mean, he basically had the same look as Link's uncle from the Link to the Past. And I felt we would just give him the outfits and the pointy ears. And so basically we went ahead and did that. Now, originally we were going to have somebody else play as Link, but he had to back out. And so my cousin Theron was available, and so he came along and got to play as Link. And then of course we had some people play the residents of Ordon, like I was able to get my little cousins to film for just one day, and then I was also able to get my friend Liz, she was living here at the time, I was able to get her to play a role. And then also there was Impa. Since I was making this the campy approach, I did not want to make Impa the way she was in Ocarina of Time. I was thinking of making her like a frail old lady like she was in the first Zelda games. But then I got Maddie Welsh, who helped out with Farmer Next Door, to help out. So I decided I'd make her more like she was in like the Oracle games, to make her kind of in the middle. Originally in the script, we had a character named Nabooru, based on Nabooru from Ocarina of Time. And she was going to have like a key role. She was going to help them through the desert. She was going to be like a lone wolf and one of the few survivors of the Gerudo. And there would even be like a whole plot point where the character of Barnes was racist towards the Gerudo because of the legacy they lived under with Ganondorf. But then after seeing her being helpful, he would, give up his prejudice. And it's kind of sad because I wanted to have that plot point, but unfortunately we could not find an actor who was right for the role, so we had to write her out, but I still want to acknowledge her by having her be referenced as a bit of a mythical figure who is, like, popular in universe. Because, you know, the way I put it was, it would have been much more disrespectful to whitewash her than to simply write her out because I couldn't find the right actor. And of course, in order to adapt a video game and do it right, one has to have familiarity with the games. Not just in references, but in lore and everything. So, you know, over the years and years of planning a Zelda fan film, I've versed myself in the lore, I've looked at all the fan theories, I've looked at fan fictions, I've looked at what was canonical, what was not canonical. I even looked at other non-canonical sources like the cartoon and the comic and the mangas. And so, you know, I came up with familiar tropes. Like, let's say one of the things that is usually criticized in the Zelda cartoon is that Link is portrayed as kind of cocky and arrogant.
Excuse me, princess.
I kind of understand where they're coming from, but I feel like it's good to give Link a character, because the whole thing of Legend of Zelda is Link is meant to be a player avatar for the player to project his or her emotions through him. And that's the reason why he doesn't talk in the games. You know, and I guess there could be a way I might experiment with a future fan film of making Link not talk, kind of like Tack from The Thief and the Cobbler, the recobbled version. But at the same time, I feel like in this film, Link would have to talk. But I kind of, you know, looked at, you know, how to make it not cringy, how to make it work. And with the whole him being like cocky and arrogant, I decided that, you know, I would have that, but he would actually develop. So, you know, I also took inspiration from Scotty Whitehurst's fan film, The Triforce Prophecy, which also took inspiration from the cartoon. And, you know, I figured, you know, to give Link a character, we would have him be cocky and arrogant like he was in the cartoon, but have him actually develop. And on top of that, originally I wasn't going to have Dark Link in there, but I figured this would have been a perfect thing, you know, to have Dark Link and the Dark World. And the whole idea of him going in the Dark World in certain scenes was also inspired by the Ringwraith Weathertop scene from Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings. And so I figured, and even Scotty Whitehurst, when reading my script, pointed out that he noticed this similarity, that what I pretty much did was I took the element of Dark Link, also taking inspiration from Dark Link in Sage of Darkness, and make it where he was like the previous hero, and he too was cocky and arrogant, and so his regrets manifested into Dark Link, and was trying to, you know, help, you know, the current Link so that he wouldn't make the same mistakes. And so, yes, this plot point was actually inspired by the hero Shade from The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And so that's another thing, was I would combine similar things in a way that it would work. So let's say at the beginning, whenever the children from Ordon are being captured by the Moblins, that was taken from, you know, Twilight Princess, when the Munchkins of Ordon are taken by the Bulbins. Especially when they go to Kakariko. And even the character Barnes, he's not based in appearance, but he is based on name off of Barnes from Twilight Princess. And even a lot of the kids took different names, like Fado. I just gave her the name Fado because that was a common name in Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess. Tallow and Mallow were... Tallow was based off of, you know, Tallow from Twilight Princess. Colin, of course, was also based on Colin from Twilight Princess. And even Nico, he was kind of based off of Nico from Wind Waker. And on top of that, what I basically also had in terms of combining certain characters is I had Link's uncle, but I also had him be the head of Ordon, so I named him Bo after Mayor Bo from Twilight Princess. And of course I looked at how to work in Ganon and Aghanim, so I basically made it where Ganon, he was destroyed, but his spiritual form was in the Dark World, waiting to be released, and so Aghanim, he was like his follower, and he had Ganon's ashes and was trying to resurrect Ganon. So that was based off of Zelda 2, in which the villains are trying to get Link's blood to bring Ganon back to life. And then, of course, a little Easter egg I had was when he met Denogan, the old man who said the famous, "It's dangerous to go alone, take this."
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
There are two things he's named after. One, his name Denogan is based off of Dan Hogan from Sage of Darkness, and he lived in Yol Mush Marsh, which was named after Joel Mush, who did Hero Time, which was a way of saying that these were like the fan films that inspired me, and he was passing the torch. And originally, I was actually going to get Scotty Whitehurst from Triforce Prophecy to play that role. I even spoke with him, and he was very interested. Unfortunately, though, he had just a lot of things that he was dealing with, and he was, like, busy. So, it's like, I wasn't able to get that, but I was able to get, some of the references with Denogan and Yomush Marsh. I also had to look at how I could get certain races in there in which it could work, but it wouldn't feel like shoehorned in fan service. And so, whenever Link goes to Maze Woods, that was based off of the beta version of the Lost Woods from Ocarina of Time, and I figured Maze Woods would just work. And of course you have him fighting the Stout Children, which was based on what you do at night in Ocarina of Time. And there, I also introduced the Bokoblins, who are like little stop-motion creatures, and I decided, instead of them being villains, they would be more like comedic kind of baddies, in which Link doesn't even have to do anything because they're too stupid for their own good. And I even made them based off of Bill and James from my film 25 Cents of Stupidity. And the Baga Tree, that was based off of a moment in the Ocarina of Time manga, because I wanted to have an evil talking tree. And then the Witch's Maple and Syrup came from, certain games, but that whole section of Link being in the woods, meeting the Baga Tree, and then meeting with the witches, that was also loosely inspired by The Lord of the Rings with Tom Bombadil and Old Man Willow. And even the Bottom of the Well took some inspiration from the Barrow Wights. I also changed a few things so it wouldn't be too redundant. So when Link goes to the Bottom of the Well, that was based more on the Hyrule family royal tomb, and then of course I had the Shadow Temple, which combined some elements of the Shadow Temple and the Bottom of the Well. And then you'll also see more of this on the DVD, but I also had to rely on using a lot of miniatures and a lot of sets, because one of the things that you also didn't really get to see too much in too many Zelda fan films was the dungeon crawl elements, like the puzzles, going to the dungeons. And I understand why. I mean, they had very low budgets. And in fact, it was very refreshing when I saw Scotty Whitehurst Oblivion Rising, got to see like the dungeon and the cemetery with the Gibdos. But I wanted to try to go the extra mile and try to incorporate some of the puzzle solving and dungeon crawl elements. However, since this is a film and not a video game, I had to make sure it worked in a way that made sense in the context of the film, so it would not be formulaic. Like, go into a dungeon, get a key here, solve a puzzle here, and especially with the boss battles. So I had to take elements, and even like the way I wrote most of it as if, kind of from the manga, like they just go into an area, they fight the boss, and then, I was able to write in the puzzle and dungeon crawl elements after that, so that way it made sense.
Congratulations, I'm free and you've solved my riddle.
And of course, since this is a movie and not a video game, a lot of that also had to be drastically shortened, or sometimes in a bit of a montage. And so basically with that, I basically just took a lot of these elements and made them work in a way in which it worked in a film, And I guess one of the best ways you could look at it is, if you wanted to make a film based off a video game and do it justice, also look at it the other way around. Like, maybe look at Spider-Man 2, the movie, and pretend it's based on Spider-Man 2, the video game. Or look at the GoldenEye movie and pretend it's based on the N64 GoldenEye video game, and kind of work off of that a little bit. And then, of course, I wasn't able to get every single element. I could not get the P-hats, even though I wanted to have them. I could not have Talon and Ingo, but I was able to get Malon, because I was able to get my friend and Angry Kitten Studios veteran so far, Danielle Cameron, who's been with us since Why Summer Band is Fun and Unholy Land, to play as Malon. And I felt that was just perfect, because my ideas, I always wanted to have her play as Malon, And if she didn't play as Malon, I'd have her play as Anju, because that's back when I was going to try to do Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. But I was able to get her to play as Malon, and she had like the right costume for it. You know, she had no familiarity with the games, but I showed her a picture, and she had some costume pieces that would have worked. And it really worked, and you know, I thought she was really believable as a live-action Malon. When it comes to the costumes, this was also a departure from my previous films. Because some of my previous films, like Unholy Land, Farm Next Door, and Mindworms, they were like, and even Whispers in the Cellar, they were films that took place either in the 80s or the 70s. So that was easy. We just had to find like a few flannel button-up shirts, or a polo shirt, the right blue jeans and stuff like that. Even with Castle Draco Martin, it wasn't really all that difficult. But for this is a fantasy, so this was like probably my second biggest film I worked on after Mindworms. And this is back when I was still living with my parents and still working 2 jobs, so I was able to afford certain costume pieces. So there were costume pieces that I got at the party store, especially medieval ones, especially some for the Moblins and for Fado. I was able to get, you know, a few plastic swords and stuff like that. But, you know, Link's tunic, that would have been a different deal. So what I did was I got my mom to make Link's hat. You know, I got the fabrics and stuff like that. And so she made it because I had a styrofoam head that we were able to use. And Link's costume wasn't really too difficult. Basically, I got like a green polo shirt. It was mainly for females because it went down, but that worked to make it more like a tunic. But I didn't want it to look too much like we just got a polo, so I did some modifications. So I cut off the trimming and cut out the buttons so that way it would look more like a rough medieval fantasy type of outfit. And of course the rest of it was easy because Theron, all I had to do was have him wear like a white undershirt, which I already had, and some khakis, which he had. We had to do some limitations. That's why Link has the sword in his belt instead of on his back, but it still worked either way. And even like some of the weapons, like the Master Sword, I had to get that online. The Hylian Shield I already had as a gift a long time ago. And then the rest of the weapons were really neutral, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. As for Princess Zelda, it was also fairly easy, because she just had like, I got a pink polo shirt, and getting some of these costumes, yes, I felt like an idiot for some of them, but that's just, you know, part of filmmaking. And then I got, you know, the dress part from the party store, and the flag part, I made that myself, because you don't see that in too many Zelda fan films. And I understand why, but I definitely want to go that extra mile. But for the most part, especially when we first started filming, we didn't have a costume ready. So that's what kind of gave me the idea that she would go in disguise, and we made her disguise similar to Tetra from Wind Waker. So we just had her wear a white shirt. I had her have like the blue button-up shirt I had. She wore khaki shorts. And in some areas, she had like a red ascot on, which was mainly just a red shirt to make it look like she was Tetra from the Wind Waker. And then even like for some other people, like in Ordon, it wasn't really that difficult. I just got certain costume pieces or certain polo shirts, especially old raggedy ones, and made it, you know, look right. Then of course, there was Aghanim. I thought that was going to be the most confusing one ever, but I found out some shortcuts around it. So basically I just got, you know, a piece of fabric, a long one, and cut a hole in it, make it kind of like a long V-neck, and it kind of fit over like a robe, and I'd belt it. And then underneath it, I would have a blue long sleeve shirt on with a red long sleeve shirt over it. And then basically, you know, I got these gloves online to make it look kind of like gnarled, because since I was going for the campy effect, I wanted Aghanim to look like a gnarled evil wizard, like a grumpy, gnarled old wizard. And I think it works because it shows that because of how much he was working for Ganondorf, he kind of let himself turn into this evil, despicable, just like he was like really aged and decayed. I didn't want to use too much makeup because we were on a low budget, so I got like this one piece that only covered like the eyes and had the nose. It was mainly for an evil witch, but it worked because Aghanim usually has his face covered like this. As for figuring that out, I basically just put a piece of fabric like under him, and then the top part was just a red shirt, and it ended up working. And I played as Aghanim in the costume, but I got someone else to do the voice for him so that it wouldn't really seem like I was playing every role and everything. And of course he had to hunch over kind of like this, and that was mainly to keep the costume in check. But it worked, because, it worked to have him be this gnarled wizard who's just kind of moving around like this, because it makes him, look like somebody who's like just broken, who just let himself go, and who has basically kind of a hunch. Because I wanted to, really showcase that, because, he basically devoted his entire life to evil and Ganon, and so it led him to really becoming a despicable, like, old wizard and everything like that. So just hold on a second, I'm getting some behind the scenes stuff.
Hold it right here. Okay, I'm figuring out something. I'm trying to figure out the best spot where I can draw it. But that's catches on my middle finger.
You guys ready? Action. Dead hand. Cut. Filming was pretty straightforward for the most part. I mainly used my camera that I use for other films like Unholy Land and Mindworms and Whispers. It's a camera I got in 2013 as a graduation present. Canon Vixia HFG20. Still works. The only damage it has is once when doing stop motion for Mindworms, it fell and the door just got a little bit bent, but, so it can't close all the way. But, it still works perfectly fine, and I'm able to still film with it. And basically, thankfully, we were lucky on certain days when we could film outside, because one of the reasons I'm leaving Mississippi is the weather in Mississippi is extremely inconsistent, and it would rain like on certain days. Sometimes it rains way too much than it needs to, especially in the summer. So we made sure to reserve certain days where it didn't rain, and thankfully it didn't, because I wanted to capture the beauty of Hyrule. But then there were a few certain days where it did seem like it was going to rain, but it worked, especially for Death Mountain, Breach of Demise, and the Graveyard, because it gave it like that gray sky look that made it look kind of gloomy and forlorn. And so luckily on those days, it was able to work out fine. Then, Theron, you look over there at Impa, we'll shoot her later, and you say, you're nervously like, am I able to pull it?
Am I able to pull it?
Then you look down the sword and like, okay then.
Alright then.
Okay, and then Percy, you say, Link, I can hold the sword, I can hold the shield for you.
Link, I can hold the shield for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Theron, you take out that sword, and you look at it and you say, well, I guess this is the end, and then you kind of stick it in the ground.
Well, I guess this is the end. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, we'll edit that.
That didn't work.
I'll get different angles.
This card's solid.
Yeah, don't worry, I'll get different angles, and
We'll do that in a minute.
let me have you grab the sheath, aim the hilt, just keep holding it. And then I'll edit some so you kind of look in shock. Now I'll get rid of the plants, because this is when it's kind of... And then whenever I say action as you walk, you say, this is the breach of demise. I hate this place, but we have to go through it.
Okay.
Ready?
Ready.
Action.
This is the breach of the Mize. I hate this place, but we have to go through it.
Go that way. Cut. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Action. Stop. Then you're like, well, we made it out alive.
Well, we made it out alive.
Then you look towards me, because this is Neighboru talking to you. Neighboru says she'll help you, Link, get to the Death Mountain, and she's going to let you rest. So Impa's like, thank you, Neighboru.
Thank you, Neighbor.
And then Link, you just kind of nod. You guys ready?
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Or some fall in the water. Okay.
And action.
Sorry.
Wait, time out. Where do we need to get to when I say the line?
Oh, stopping from that stick right there.
Okay.
Where am I looking at?
You'll just look out there, and then you'll walk that way, and then I'll turn the camera that way.
And remind me, am I saying find shelter or make shelter?
We have to find shelter.
Find shelter.
So it's like, we're out of there, we need to find shelter.
Okay.
You ready?
Right.
Action.
Link, now that we're out of there, we need to find shelter.
Cut. So when I say action, you'll just walk towards me. You guys ready?
Yep.
Yeah.
Action. And then, of course, when filming like the dungeon crawl elements, that basically we use my grandma's church building because, you know, she let us use that for previous films. We even use it for Mind Worms, of course. And you'll also see more of this on the DVD, but to keep it cheap, I tried to find whatever shortcuts I could use. So basically, I found some wallpaper at Hobby Lobby that looked like bricks, especially old stone bricks. I also found, you know, some of that, you know, crinkly brown paper to use as caves like I did in Mind Worms. And so I would basically kind of set it up, but also give it a little bit of flair. So especially, you know, the Shadow Temple and the dungeon of the castle, those were like the first things that we filmed, and I was very proud of it. Like, I basically, you know, had it set up, and then I would put in like some plastic skeletons and plastic bones, and even like some fake spiders and stuff like that, and even some pieces of fake gold, and even put a little bit of vegetation to make it look like it was like worn out and everything. And we were able to use that kind of multi-purposely, so that way it looked like, you know, these ancient dungeons, and it even gave it a nice look, kind of like the comic book of A Link to the Past, you know, with the right color scheme and everything. And we didn't really have much of them mapped, but I kind of figured out how I could make some of them work. And action. Now for take two.
Okay. But is this when we run?
Oh no, we'll do that after this one though. So this is like just the second take of that.
Okay.
Action. Shot for the miniatures.
She's scary.
I'm scary.
Customer service scary.
Customer service isn't scary. It's so nice that you can't be
I'm
mad at
such
it.
a Karen.
You guys ready?
Yes.
And action.
What is that? This is where somebody used to torture his prisoners.
This is where Aganon used to torture his prisoners before he left us. Even before he betrayed us to join forces with Ganon, he was always sick in the head.
And then they have you just a close-up of you just looking at kind of like the corpse with a disgusted look on your face.
What is that?
Song?
Ready, guys?
Yeah.
Action. Cut. You guys ready?
No. But yes.
Action.
That is the lens of truth.
Now you get it. Don't worry, I'll feed you the lines, so.
You froze so bad.
Well, I hope I don't move and then I can fix lines.
So stay like they're like lens of truth.
Lens of truth.
It shows men things unseen to the naked eye.
Are you sure?
Yes, I know this place.
Okay. Action. It's dangerous to go alone. Well, hold on. I'll look silly with this outfit. So, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this. And you kind of nod. Good. And of course, we also had a big blue screen. We had to use blue more than anything because Link wears green. And we were able to use that a lot and key them in. And I wanted, like, my inspiration came from Sid and Marty Krofft's Land of the Lost, in which they had like a similar kind of thing where they would have certain sets but they blue screen in whenever you had to see the entire thing and you had to see them kind of small. In this, I was able to digitally color correct it all, and we'll get to that soon. That's when you kind of pick up the Triforce and look at it with wonder. Like, make sure to stand on the side though. Like, stay on this side so that way Percy can be screened in good enough. Ready?
Okay.
Let me play music. The right sounds in and music and everything like that. You guys ready?
Yep.
Action. Cut. You guys ready?
Yep.
Action. Cut. The only issue was, you know, it was like at the church building, the people are Southern Baptists, so I wasn't, well, they're Southern Methodists, but I wasn't able to leave a lot of like the sets, especially with the dungeons and the skeletons, so I had to make sure I had to put stuff away every time we were done filming, so that way we wouldn't get yelled at or get slapped with a Bible or something like that. And then, of course, I wanted to use the Book of Mudora, and I used the Hyrule Historia because I felt that was like just, that was too good of an opportunity to pass up. And I printed out a little piece of paper with an image that looked like old paper and wrote the stuff in Hylian text. I even used the Gerudo text for the miniatures and the sets of the Spirit Temple. As for Hyrule itself, thankfully, spending a lot of my childhood here and using my own imaginary adventures, I had my own ways of making it work. I also, and I'll go over this a lot in this DVD, but I wanted to capture the spirit of Shigeru Miyamoto's childhood. Like he said, as a child, he would take a lantern and explore some caves, and that's what kind of inspired a lot of the elements from, for the first Legend of Zelda and everything. And I decided I would do that, so that's why you have Link going into, like, that dungeon first, and he eventually, has a lantern, and he goes into that little cave, the forest tomb. And for that, of course, we had the sets built in the church building, but for the exterior, we used, like, the old root cellar, because I also used to visit that a lot, and it was such a fun location. Unfortunately, we could not film outside of there anymore because it was overgrown, so I had to reuse some old footage from Mind Worms and color correct it to the right way. Now, of course, we had really cool locations to use. Like, we had forests, we had creeks, we had fields that worked, and even farm areas. And then we even had, like, a huge gravel pit and a little desert area near it that we could use for both Death Mountain and Gerudo Valley. And I also combined, some stock footage and miniatures, so that way it wouldn't be too distracting and everything. And then the pond that we use, especially for the lake in Mind Worms, we use for Lake Hylia. Like, I always had the idea that whenever I was going to do Ocarina of Time, I always planned on using that as Lake Hylia. Obviously, it's not big enough to be a lake, but, it kind of gives off the same kind of impression for a low-budget film. First, for the effects, I wanted to use more CGI in this film. I didn't want to use CGI in movies like Farm Next Door and Holy Land because they're meant to be like cheap, low-budget 70s, 80s horror films. Mind Worms definitely could not use CGI because it was meant to be like an 80s B-movie. But for Zelda, it was a fantasy, so I always had plans for Zelda to be my first movie to have CGI. And we definitely wanted to use more CGI, and I even had a friend who would have been able to do CGI, but we were all busy and we just didn't have the time or the money. But I still got some CGI effects on YouTube that were done in front of a green screen. And so, either way, this definitely is the very first film of mine to have CGI, and that's a historical moment for Angry Kitten Studios. Now, we mainly use it for like the Triforce pieces, and I even found some CG effects on PowerPoint because they had some 3D effects that I could put in front of a green or blue background. That's what I did for the Stout Children. I decided that when we saw the full bodies, they would be CG, but when we saw them up close, it would be like a little plastic skeleton that I had. It's the same one from Unholy Land, of course. And I mainly use stop motion for certain creatures, like the Bokoblins, the Dodongo, and the Dodongo was actually just like an action figure. And I also made, certain stop motion models like the Dead Hand, the Lizalfos, the Moblin King, because, I wanted to make these capture the spirit. And I think using stop motion for the Dead Hand really worked, because it gave a bit of a jerkiness. And I think I even saw like a CG, like a really well done fan-made CG video for Dead Hand, and one of the comments said that could really work in CG or stop motion. And then there are certain things I wanted to use CGI before, but we couldn't. Like the fairies, I wanted them to be all CG. The only time we used CG for them was when we saw them as like a little ball of light. And that was something I got on, the internet. But, we just could not make the models, so I used stop motion instead, but try to give them a bit of a flair to make them look kind of, fantasy-like. But, I did use CG fairy wings that I put behind them, and then I also added a little bit of a glow so that way they could look, fairy-like. And I wanted to use CG for the Picori because originally, I did not think I would be able to make the Picori look cute or easy on the eyes in stop motion, but I gave it a try. And eventually I was able to make it work and did some stop motion with them, especially at my grandparents, to And I think it really worked in that because it gave off more the impression that there are these little people in a fantasy world. As for the Triforce, I also used PowerPoint because you could get either like a red or blue pyramid, so I used those for the Triforce pieces. And it made sense, in my opinion, to use CG for the Triforce, because even though that's kind of a MacGuffin that they're trying to get, it is a more mythical, godlike kind of item, so using CGI for them works, especially since I base them off of their appearance in the cartoon. For the Triforce of Courage, I unfortunately could not get a green Triforce or even change the color. So that's why when Link first grabs it from the treasure chest, we just have implying the Triforce until he sees the mark on his hand. And I think it works to build suspense, to see him get this thing that we don't see yet. As for the editing, I used iMovie, especially because, I got a new Mac in 2020 that had better processing power, and so I could, export longer videos, especially this one. I used a lot of color correcting because I wanted this to look more like a campy epic fantasy, so I was able to do some color correcting to make it look more shot better. That way, instead of it looking like a 16mm film, it looked more like a fantasy. And I also was able to copy and paste the color correcting to certain videos. I also had to make sure I changed it and made it look different based on the lighting, whether it was daytime or nighttime or inside of a dark dungeon. The color correcting really makes a difference, and it's something that really has to be handled with care. And I'll even go into more detail on that on its specific feature in this DVD. And as for burning the DVD itself, I got System DVD Burner, and I was able to burn it. I had to use 3 discs, especially to split up the features, but it still works and makes it like a hefty little package that's really nice for it. I tell you guys, this project was just as much of a passion project as Mindworms was. It was an idea I had ever since 5th grade. It was something I've always wanted to do, something I've always dreamed of doing, and I finally made my dream come true. It was a lot of hard work, and even right now I kind of had to distance myself from it because I'm a little tired of looking at it, similar to finishing up like a final capstone or final assignment in school or something. But man, it has a nice story to tell, it has some really cool behind the scenes stuff, and it's really, really nice to have this movie done, and I'm so glad that I got to make it. I'm really proud of it for what it is, and it's something nice to look back on. I'm hoping it can be inspirational to you guys too. I hope it's really good for Zelda fans out there. I really hope other people who inspired me, like Josh Dixon and Eric Zala and Joe Mush, get to see this. And at the same time, I hope this can be inspirational for any new people who want to make their own Zelda fan film, or any other fan film, or just any original idea. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and hope you guys enjoyed this behind the scenes. This is Patrick Reagan signing off.